Go crazy.
All I know is on that last quiz, all I knew was preganglionic.
Oh, good.
I was like,
yeah.
all of it. I was like, that's the only thing I remember.
Apparently that's
For
all
sure.
you needed to know.
Yeah. I was like, I got it.
I'm done. Yeah.
I needed more pressure in my head, guys.
Aww.
Knock some things loose.
That's conducive to learning, right? Brain damage. I'm sorry.
Knock out all the old information, put new information in.
Here we go.
Okay. Okay, so, defecation reflex, great. Where do we start? So our colon is moving things along, and there's peristalsis and antiperistalsis that is allowing for the uptake of what in the colon?
Nutrition?
Like, what's being absorbed? Your colon absorbs water and electrolytes.
Okay, I
Like,
was
that's
like,
the main
no,
thing.
I don't know if I think you were asking.
Yeah,
but
sorry.
It's water.
So it's moving and it's moving, and it's going to get to like the descending colon, and then that's when the defecation reflex is going to start. So what happens is, one, there's going to be distension. So that's just like it's getting full. So it fills up. Does that make sense? Okay. So as it's filling up, you're going to get little like afferent nerves, and they're going to, one, just go up to the myenteric plexus and send a myenteric signal back down, which is going to be like weak peristalsis. So that's your first reflex, is the myenteric reflex. So that's intrinsic. What does intrinsic mean?
Within the gut wall?
Yes. So it comes up, it goes back down, it causes peristalsis, but it doesn't have to go to the spinal cord or anywhere else. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So everything after that gets a little bit more complicated.
So it's kind of like the intestinal
Mm-hmm.
intestinal fuel, is that what it's called? Intestinal something.
Just like the intestinal signaling.
Yeah.
Because the intestinofugal sends afferents out to the prevertebral ganglia, and then they come back.
Okay, so
Yeah, I got that wrong because I thought it was intrinsic.
Oh,
And
no.
apparently it's extrinsic.
It's extrinsic.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I mean, I just mixed that up.
not by any fault of you.
No, that was 100% me.
Okay. All right, so then along with these little afferents here that are just going to the myenteric plexus, there's also going to be ones that are going to the sacral plexus. So what is the sacral plexus?
Pelvic nerve.
Mm-hmm. So this is where like your pelvic nerve is. It's going to send other signals like up to the brain. So this is going to cause your parasympathetic innervation to come back. So that's going to be definitely the pelvic nerve. And is it going to be preganglionic or postganglionic? Why?
Because of ganglion.
It's parasympathetic.
Perfect. So that's going to be preganglionic, and what is it going to release? What do all preganglionic neurons release? Acetylcholine. And what kind of receptor do they act on?
Nicotinic.
Nicotinic. And is that GI, GQ, or GS?
GQ.
Yeah, I think that's right. Let me check. Oh wait, no, that was a trick question.
Oh, because it's not, it's ionic.
It's
not
ionic.
coupled. Totally got me, Brandy, damn it.
I'm glad I didn't know the answer. I was like, I don't know.
All right, so it's
So
nicotinic.
Okay, I was saying it is still nicotinic,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. So those can be. Do you remember like the vagal inhibitory and vagal excitatory fibers, like VEF and VIF? So your pelvic is going to be PIF or PEF. So our preganglionics, they're all going to be releasing acetylcholine on nicotinic receptors, but they can be inhibitory or excitatory. So that is going to go to the enteric inhibitory motor neurons or the enteric excitatory motor neurons. Does that make sense? So we're trying to cause defecation to happen, so our excitatory motor neurons are going to excite the smooth muscle of the transverse colon. So they're going to say cause peristalsis to happen. And then your inhibitory motor neurons, they're going to the internal anal sphincter and they're saying relax. Because we want to excite the colon, we want to relax our barriers. Does that
So
make
things
sense?
can get out, right?
Yes, because we're
Okay,
trying to
that
get
makes
stuff out.
So you do it at the same time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
this happens at the same time.
Okay.
And it's all from this one stimulation up to the sacral plexus.
Okay.
So, that begs the question, our enteric inhibitory and enteric excitatory motor neurons, what do they release?
Excitatory would be substance P or acetylcholine.
Mm-hmm. And in this chapter, he really only talked about acetylcholine, so that's all I'm going to put. We haven't really talked about substance P very much anymore. And then for the inhibitory motor neurons, what do they release?
Nitric oxide.
Perfect. Okay. And then are they acting on muscarinic or nicotinic receptors?
Muscarinic.
Muscarinic. Why is that?
They're more specific.
They are. And these enteric motor neurons, those are technically like the postganglionic neurons. So like your PIF and PEF, that's the preganglionic, and then they act on these enterics, which are the postganglionic. And then are they GS, GQ, or GI? I think they're
I think-
GQ.
I was gonna say, I wanna say GQ, but I'm not gonna say anything. Not this time.
Yeah, they're GQ. Does this make sense so far?
I have a question,
Okay,
and I should probably know this.
that's okay.
GQ meaning what?
So GQ causes, here, I'll just kind of draw it. So this is like the cell membrane, and this is our little receptor. So a ligand comes in and binds our little G protein, or our G protein coupled receptor. So here down inside the cell, there's 3 little proteins, and those are called the G proteins.
Okay.
And what a GQ does is the little alpha subunit is going to phosphorylate these 2 subunits, which are then going to, it causes cleavage of a couple things, and it ends up making IP3 and DAG. Okay? So the IP3 goes and causes release of calcium from the ER, and DAG is going to make or PKC.
Okay.
Okay?
That makes sense.
All right. So protein kinase C. Ugh.
So then, like, GI, I'm assuming, makes a different PK something. Is that the difference?
Not quite.
No? Okay.
So this is GQ. So then the best way to explain GI is to explain GS.
Okay.
So this will be GS, and we've got our protein. Our ligand comes in, and it activates the alpha subunit, and it's going to end up turning on adenylyl cyclase,
Okay.
which is going to make CAMP,
Uh-huh.
which is then going to make PKA.
Okay.
Okay, so that is another protein kinase. But, that's GS. So S stands for like synthesize or stimulate.
Okay.
GI stands for inhibit. Like S was the first one, and then we found I. So we have I, ligand comes in, there's 3 little G proteins. Alpha subunit causes the inhibition of adenylyl cyclase.
Oh.
So it inhibits the production of PKA.
Okay. Got you.
Okay?
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
Like I said, probably something I should have known, but.
No, that's okay. It's
Try and keep that
confusing.
straight, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to keep straight. All right, so we've done our myenteric reflex, which is just the little intrinsic pathway, and then we've kind of started on our sacral reflex, which is going to be, afferents go up to the sacral plexus. I'm gonna write this out. Then what happens? Somebody tell me.
Afferents go up to the sacral plexus.
Afferents to sacral plexus.
And then I'm gonna assume that your PIFs or PEFs
Mhm.
go to your inhibitory or excitatory motor neurons?
Yes. So PIF stands for what?
Pelvic inhibition fiber?
Inhibitory fiber, yeah, good. So it's going to release what your PIF is?
Nitric
Oh, you mean like
oxide?
Is it preganglionic or postganglionic?
Three.
Pre.
Okay.
So it releases what?
Acetylcholine.
Onto what kind of receptor?
Nicotinic.
And then it's releasing that onto what kind of nerve?
postganglionic.
And they have a specific name. It's,
The inhibitory motor neuron?
so the enteric inhibitory motor neuron.
Okay.
Does this make sense?
Yes.
Is this okay?
Just
There's a lot of letters.
It's hard for me to think of like a neuron being like an actual something that like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, but it's good that you're asking it that way, cause that's how he's gonna.
Cause this is how, for him to get as many points as they're gonna have to be on this quiz, it's gonna all be specifics
Yeah.
like this. I don't know how else he's going to,
And that's gonna screw
Get that.
a lot of people up.
yeah, this is gonna be,
So
A bit of a
I'm
doozy.
fully expecting this to still be on our test.
yeah.
yeah.
Unfortunately.
It's a nice idea for it to not be, but yeah.
Are you okay, Kira? You're being quiet. Okay. Do you need ibuprofen? Did you?
You can have some of my water. There's not much left, but you can use it. I don't mind.
We can totally move the, we
Yeah.
can do our iPad first.
Sorry, Cody. You really should stop doing that.
What did you say?
You should stop doing that.
I thought you said you should stop moving.
Oh.
Oh, no.
I was like, am I that clumsy, Sarah?
No, stop beating yourself up.
Okay, so
Yes.
the sacral plexus receives the afferents from the enteric
Yes.
ganglion
Yes.
and then sends out PIF or PEFs.
Yes.
PIFs act on EIMN,
Mhm.
PEFs act on EEMN. What confuses me is the arrows there. You're not saying that there's only the EMN in the internal anal sphincter, are you? Like, that's not what that means, right?
That there's only the inhibitory ones in the IAS?
That there's only the excitatory.
The arrows look like
They got crossed,
Yeah.
hang on.
I spent 5 minutes staring at it to
Okay.
realize that they were just.
Sorry. Okay. Okay, so your EEMNs are going to the colon.
Okay,
Your EIMNs are going to the internal anal sphincter.
gotcha.
Sorry, that was confusing.
I did the same thing.
And then, what do you have next to PIF over there?
So I have PIF is preganglionic.
Okay, I just didn't see it.
Okay. And then, so preganglionic secrete.
Acetylcholine onto a nicotinic receptor.
Yes. And that nicotinic receptor is on that dendrite of the enteric inhibitory motor neuron.
Okay.
Okay? So your inhibitory motor neuron is going where?
To your internal anal sphincter.
And why is that?
Cause we're going to inhibit everything, cause we want it to relax.
We want it to go
We're gonna
through.
pass.
This is, your internal anal sphincter is like the door, and we're going and telling the door to open, like we're unlocking the door. So your EIMN releases what? What's its neurotransmitter? if we're relaxing the internal anal sphincter.
You know,
Mm-hmm. And is that gonna be a muscarinic or a nicotinic?
be muscarinic because it's
Good.
specific.
And just because I think he might ask it, if he asks what kind of muscarinic receptor, M3 is always the safest bet.
Okay.
Like, I think there's a couple different ones, but if in doubt, pick M3,
That's good to know.
okay? All right. So at the same time that our inhibitory fibers are inhibiting the internal anal sphincter, our excitatory fibers are exciting the descending colon. Does that make sense? Because we're gonna push at the same time we're opening the door. Are you okay with that? Okay. So your pelvic excitatory fibers, what do they release? It's kind of a trick question.
Acetylcholine.
And what kind of receptors?
Nicotinic.
Uh-huh. And they are synapsing with what kind of nerve?
Enteric excitatory.
Mm-hmm. And it's going where?
To the colon.
To the descending colon
And rectum.
and rectum. All right, and your excitatory motor neurons release what? This is where it gets different.
Yep. Or acetylcholine.
So they're just gonna do acetylcholine
Okay.
onto what kind of receptor?
Still nicotinic.
Is it?
I don't know.
It's actually gonna be muscarinic because we're still smooth muscle.
Okay.
So nicotinic is only for like neuron to neuron or neuron to skeletal muscle. So nicotinics like fast, so we want our nerve impulses to be really fast, and then like your skeletal muscle, my brain says move my arm, and that needs to happen fast. So that's why skeletal muscle is nicotinic, but smooth muscle is like not as important. So it's not, it doesn't have to be as fast, it just needs to happen eventually. So that's why it has muscarinic. So we're gonna be nicotinic, pelvic excitatory to excitatory motor neuron, and then down here from the excitatory motor neuron to the smooth muscle is gonna be muscarinic. Does that make sense? Okay.
So that is that a reflex, like the sacral reflex?
Mm-hmm.
And then the myenteric reflex is just,
Is just
The
what's
first.
happening intrinsically.
okay. gotcha.
Okay.
Okay.
So the sacral reflex is specifically going up to the sacral plexus, coming back as the pelvic nerve, and exciting the descending colon and rectum and inhibiting the internal anal sphincter.
Okay.
And he has a couple of names for it. So it is the sacral reflex. He also calls it the rectoanal reflex.
Does he also call it the spinal?
That's a different
Yeah.
one. That's the next one. So something else to kind of keep straight here to help organize yourself. The pelvic nerve, is it parasympathetic, sympathetic, or somatic?
Parasympathetic.
Yes. So the spinal one that we're talking about next, it's gonna be sympathetic.
He just is really bad with commas.
Yeah.
So I never know if he's,
It's the Oxford comma. He doesn't put Oxford commas in.
it's not just that one though.
Really?
Like, yeah, there's a couple places
His
where
grammar's
Sarah
not
and I
great.
were like, okay,
What
we
is
don't know if
he?
it's like,
It's a forever run.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, this is true.
So it's like, I don't know if it's 3 things or 2 things, and one of them has a ridiculously long name.
Which is not unrealistic because, yeah.
Okay. So everything is always under control of parasympathetic and sympathetic innervation. So what is our big important sympathetic nerve in the pelvic cavity? You might not remember this, we didn't really talk about it a whole lot in anatomy.
Gastric.
Yeah, good. So it's coming out of your thoracolumbar spine. At some point, it's going to synapse in one of the ganglia, and it's going to come out of that as the hypogastric nerve.
Hooray.
Hello, little friend. And it's sympathetic. So immediately, what do we know about the hypogastric nerve when it synapses here in the gut?
Excitatory.
Is it preganglionic or postganglionic? Post. So it is coming down and it's going to synapse directly onto the internal anal sphincter and it's going to be postganglionic. Is that clear? Okay. And since it is excitatory, like you said, what does the sympathetic nervous system release to excite or constrict smooth muscle? Perfect. And do you know what kind of receptor that is?
Norepinephrine receptor.
Well, it is. It is that, but it has a specific name.
I don't remember.
Okay. So it's going to be, it's called alpha-1 beta adrenergic.
Damn it.
What?
What?
Oh, man.
So adrenergic means adrenaline. So norepinephrine's other name is noradrenaline. So they're the same thing, basically. So you have norepinephrine, alpha-1 beta adrenergic. Do you remember all the, like the epinephrine receptors? There's like A1, A2, A3. It's just that.
Okay.
Okay?
I was like, where did this come from?
Yeah.
Okay.
Way back.
Way back in Dr. McFarland Neurophys,
Oh,
without the
wow.
last time we talked about it.
Yep. I was like, I'm knowing this much and hoping I can pass the test.
It's
So,
gonna be fine.
clearly it was not one of those that I knew.
You look questioning.
I'm trying to
Okay.
keep it straight in my head. I'm good.
Okay. So normally, when the defecation reflex is not happening, your hypogastric postganglionic nerve is coming and it's sending norepinephrine to alpha-1 beta adrenergic receptors on the internal anal sphincter, causing it to stay contracted. So our spinal reflex is basically your brain is just sending, or actually, yeah, it's just sending inhibitory reflexes to the hypogastric nerve so that it won't be able to do this. So it's getting these afferents about how there's distension, and then it's saying, okay, turn the hypogastric nerve off for a minute on the internal anal sphincter, the one that is not controllable. Does that make sense?
To make it constrict.
To get to stop.
To make it stop constricting.
Okay, got you.
So under normal conditions, the hypogastric nerve is causing constriction with norepinephrine.
Because we don't want stuff to just fall out.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's bad news. So once there's distension in the colon, these afferents are gonna come up and send a signal to the hypogastric that says, stop what you're doing. We need to open the door, because hypogastric's like the door lock,
Okay.
okay? So that reflex is called what?
Spinal bubble, spinal.
It's just spinal. Just spinal. Spinal bulbal spinal's next.
I keep getting what's next.
You do. Okay, alright. Oh, I'm going to erase this for a moment. Okay, so the last one is probably the most important one. And it's called what, Kira?
Spinal bubble, spinal.
Uh-huh, and I need a different color marker. So I can keep all this straight.
So mix your markers up with theirs.
I've got them all. Okay, so spinal bulbal spinal. The big three parts of the nervous system is parasympathetic, sympathetic, and somatic. So is it clear how we have taken care of parasympathetic and we've taken care of sympathetic? So now the only part we have left to take care of is somatic, because your external anal sphincter is somatic only. Is that good?
Yes.
Alright, so you have the PDC, which is the Pontine Defecation Center, and it's up there with all of the nucleus tractus solitarius and the nucleus ambiguus and all that stuff we talked about last week. It's also in with it. We just didn't talk about it last week because we didn't care. But it's the exact same area, and it's just another conscious perception of what's going on in the distal colon. Okay? So you're going to get your same afferent is going to say, hey, there's distension here. It's going to go up to the sacral plexus. There's going to be neurons in here that are going to say, oh, let's send that to the brain. So you're going to have another afferent that's going to go to your PDC, and it's going to say, okay, this is something we need to take care of. If it's like a potty-trained animal, like a dog, it's going to send back fibers. They're going to come back through the sacral plexus, and they're going to go back to the EAS, and they're going to keep it excited / contracted. Because now is not a good time to go. Once it gets to the point that they have to go, or that they're like able to go, then it's going to cause the EAS to relax. Does that make sense? And this is going to be like your upper motor neuron, lower motor neuron thing, so we should probably talk about where the cell bodies are just for the heck of it.
So they go from the PDC through this, they just go through the sacral plexus,
Mhm.
they don't synapse at the sacral plexus?
They do synapse at the sacral
Oh.
plexus.
Just onto a different,
So do you remember upper and lower motor neurons?
oh, okay, yeah, that's where this whole thing
Yes,
comes in.
because this is technically skeletal muscle. So we've sent an afferent up. It's going to have a cell body here in the PDC. Your upper motor neuron does. So upper motor neuron cell body in the PDC goes back down the spinal cord, synapses in the sacral plexus, so it's going to synapse inside the spinal cord, and then it's going to send that lower motor neuron out to either excite or inhibit the EAS.
Okay.
Okay. And because this is a really good quiz question, what is being released from the lower motor neuron?
If it's excitatory or inhibitory? Or,
It doesn't matter actually. I'll explain why in a minute.
I have a quick question first.
Huh?
So is that always an excitatory nerve, but it's inhibited? Okay.
So your lower motor neuron,
So-
always excitatory. Upper motor neuron is inhibitory. Remember? Okay. So once we actually need to inhibit the EAS, your inhibitory signal is going to come from the PDC, and it's going to tell this one to stop. Do you remember that from last semester?
Kinda, yeah.
Okay. So what is it releasing?
It'd be acetylcholine.
Acetylcholine. If in doubt, it's acetylcholine.
I should have just gone with my gut. Don't make me laugh, it hurts.
Do we need to take you to the hospital?
No, fine.
What are we gonna tell them? Like, oh, she hit her head on a dead horse.
She hit her head on a horse stool. Excuse me?
Don't ask questions.
It's kinda
Just-
like, somebody almost got run over by when they were pushing the cadavers back into the cooler. I was like, could
Oh,
you
God.
imagine, like,
I got hit
being
by a dead
hit by
cow.
that, and having something actually happen, you have to go, and you have to be like,
Have to,
well, I
like,
got
tell
run
them.
over.
Got run
By
over by a dead
cow?
horse.
On hooks.
That was on a pulley system because
Hanging
it was
from a
dead.
wall.
I've
Okay.
never seen them move. I still think it's a myth.
It's creepy.
Oh, it's not a good thing.
It's real weird.
She's in the
I've
first
never-
lab.
I've been the first lab. I've never seen
Oh,
them
you've
move.
never?
None of them.
Thank
It's,
you.
I don't like it.
It's
It's
creepy.
gross. Okay, so your lower motor neuron of the pudendal nerve, we didn't talk about what it's called. It releases acetylcholine, and it's onto what kind of receptor?
Less nicotinic.
Nicotinic,
Because it's somatic.
because it's somatic. And this is called the pudendal nerve. Okay, so kind of a review. What does the hypogastric nerve do? Parasympathetic, sympathetic, or somatic?
Sympathetic.
Sympathetic.
Okay, and
Excitatory to the internal anal sphincter.
good, that's my next question. Okay, what is the main parasympathetic nerve we have to worry about?
Pelvic.
Which, does it send pre or post ganglionic nerves?
Pre.
Pre. And they synapse onto what?
Excitatory, inhibitory motor neurons.
Perfect. And then what's the somatic control? What's the somatic nerve?
Pudendal.
And it synapses where?
The external.
Does it have neurons that go to the descending colon?
No.
No. Does it have neurons that go to the IAS?
No.
Why not?
Because it's
only
somatic.
controls that.
Perfect. Because it only goes to somatic muscle. So the external anal sphincter is all we have to worry about. What's the only intrinsic control of the defecation reflex?
Myoteric.
Which is just what? Somebody explain it.
It's
Like
just like when
afferents.
there's distension, it sends afferents to the myoteric ganglion, and the myoteric ganglion sends
Yep.
something
Yeah,
back.
like weak peristalsis.
Yeah, that was good. Does the sympathetic nerve send pre or post ganglionic nerves to the internal anal sphincter?
Post.
And what is the sympathetic nerve?
Hypogastric.
Okay. What is the parasympathetic nerve?
Pelvic.
Where are the afferent nerve cell bodies? Of all of them.
Sacral plexus.
Not quite, but close.
In the
Spinal cord?
myoteric plexus.
Farther away. You're closer to the spinal cord. Where are all the sensory neuron cell bodies ever?
Dorsal root ganglion.
Yeah.
Duh.
Up and down.
I was like, I was thinking so hard.
I was trying on that one. I was like, I'm gonna make this tricky.
Worked. How embarrassing.
Can you
Okay.
repeat the question and possibly write it out?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So where are the afferent nerve cell bodies?
So all sensory nerve cell bodies are in the dorsal root ganglion.
Basically, yes.
Does everybody have like a good way to remember that?
I
Just
don't have a.
sensory dorsal ganglia. That's-
Sarah was
yeah.
kind of on fire of coming up with ways to remember stuff earlier, so.
I'll think on it. I'll think on it.
Okay, so the PDC does what?
It controls, yeah, When
What
you go-
part of defecation?
external.
External anal sphincter.
Mm-hmm,
So
which
somatic.
is, yeah, somatic or like the, like conscious control. Where does the pelvic nerve, or where does the pudendal nerve synapse? Give me two locations.
The sacral plexus.
Where at in the sacral plexus? Just specific, not specific, just. Is it inside the CNS or outside the CNS?
Inside.
Side.
Good.
And
Um,
then.
Wait, what was the question?
Where are two places that the pudendal nerve synapses?
Okay.
So your pudendal nerve does what?
That's the somatic, right? Okay. So it's synapses on the EAS.
It does, and then one other place.
Oh, the
The
PDC.
sacral plex.
So the cell bodies of the upper motor neurons are here in the
Okay.
PDC, and then it's gonna synapse here in the sacral plexus, and then it's gonna synapse, here on the EAS. There's also gonna be afferents coming back up that will synapse at the dorsal root ganglia, and then they'll synapse here with the upper motor neuron cell bodies in the PDC. There were multiple answers to that, I guess, sorry. Do pelvic inhibitory and excitatory fibers release the same thing or different things?
The same.
The same, was it?
They're released the same because they're preganglionic.
What does it release?
Acetylcholine.
And what kind of receptor does that bind to?
Nicotinic.
Good. Do excitatory, oh, I'm sorry,
Or muscarinic, depending on where it is.
are you sure about that? Preganglionic?
I thought you just meant acetylcholine.
Oh, okay. For that, just for the preganglionic nerves release acetylcholine, and it only is going to bind to nicotinic. But your postganglionic nerves also release acetylcholine, and it can bind to
Muscarinic.
or nicotinic if it's somatic, but smooth muscle is always gonna be muscarinic. Okay. Your hypogastric nerve normally secretes what neurotransmitter? Mm-hmm. Do you get, okay, and what does that normally cause to happen?
Contraction.
Version of the IEA.
Mm-hmm.
IAS.
IAS.
So
There's
just
too
add
many
some
letters.
letters. You know what I mean?
If you add enough letters, it'll be right,
Yeah,
but
and
if you have it wrong,
eventually- Just eliminate the ones that don't need either and they're all there.
just put the right letters, I
Right.
mean.
Okay.
How do you guys feel with this?
Can you write out the name of the reflex for the PDC?
Yes, it's going to be
Do you know where the bulba part of that comes from?
like the bulb of the penis, or like, that's how I was remembering it.
Oh.
No,
The
I really
bulb
don't
of
know.
the penis?
Like-
What does the penis have to do with that?
It's in the same area.
Oh, well, I guess that's true.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Like maybe it crosses over it, or behind it, or beside it.
Somewhere it's there.
Around it.
So we haven't really talked about the other reflexes that were in this chapter, but they all start with where it comes from, where it goes, and then like where it goes back to.
Cotton Eye Joe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it comes from the spine, it goes to whatever you want the bulb to be, and then it goes back to the spine.
Okay.
Because it's like the one that's most in the loop because it's your conscious perception pathway. So you also know what's going on, or your animal also knows what's going on, we think.
That's all of our reflexes.
Yes, all of the ones that have to do with the defecation reflex. So the sacral reflex is what?
Parasympathetic.
The spinal reflex is what?
Sympathetic.
And the spinobulbar spinal reflex is what?
Somatic.
Good. He put the sacral and the spinal reflex, so that's parasympathetic and sympathetic, he put them like under a bigger category together called the rectosphincteral rectoanal reflex. That's a lot of words.
Oh my gosh. So together, the sacral and the spinal, right?
Sphincteral rectoanal reflex. That's awesome.
You just know he's gonna want that name on the friggin'.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Why not?
And I'm gonna put the sacral plus the spinal reflexes.
Yes. So that's just like the big, it's like control of the descending colon and internal anal sphincter. So it's sacral reflex and spinal reflex. And since that's only smooth muscle, it's going to just be under parasympathetic or sympathetic control. So this is like your autonomic reflex, rectosphincteral rectoanal reflex.
So it's basically just not somatic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh man, he just loves to make things complicated.
How do you guys feel with this one?
I feel like I got it.
Yeah.
How are you, Kara?
I feel good.
Okay.
Well,
Um,
very well done.
and like we kind of said, his writing of this chapter was not in its best form.
Not great.
So I have done my best to put this one together because it was so like scattered. Like I have a hard time following this too because it's just so
Yeah.
all over the place in that chapter. So this is, to the best of my knowledge, how the defecation reflex works.
Makes
I
more
like
sense than
it.
his notes do.
Yep.
So,
Okay,
I
and I
like it.
think if you can remember the names of the nerves, if they're parasympathetic, sympathetic, or somatic, and then if you can get in your head what is being released as a neurotransmitter in the receptors, I think that will get you through it. Like, if you go
Should be
home
able
and
to
study,
think through it.
yeah, if you go home and study one thing, learn that, and then if you can get the neurotransmitters to kind of fall into place where they should be, that would be my advice.
Take a picture of my notes for Cody. And he's gonna be like, what in the world?
Yeah, I'm sorry for all the arrows and the colors and the,
It's surprisingly clear for
Okay.
like what you have to try to put
Yeah.
on
Okay.
there.
you should see, like, I keep a whole note thing of all, like, my drawings of it, and it's like all over the place.
Should we stop the recording?
Yeah, I
Since it's
know.
in two sections.
Is this finished
Yes,
with the
this
first?
is done.
Send me the pictures of Tom as well.